There are three things your narrative, your pitch needs to do. First, connect. Connection is key. Direction is next. You got to lead them through the forest in the right path. And finally is projection. And that's your personality and attitude. And personality is a fixed entity.
We are creative, we are constructive, we are imaginative, we are exploring, we are creative solutions.
Hi, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. On the show, you'll hear interviews with innovative creative artists, entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders. You'll have a front row seat as they explore their internal, uncharted waters about what inspires them to grow, achieve, and innovate. Get their insights and realizations as I tease out answers to questions they've never pondered before. You'll also learn how to supercharge your innovative drive, mindfulness, and communication skills so you can succeed. This episode is brought to you by my favorite productivity hack, the Brain FM app, this podcast's host, Podbean, as well as my book, Speak From Within, Engage, Inspire, and Motivate Any Audience. Hey there, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I am also super grateful to have this week's guest. You are going to learn so much from Mike Verret. Check out this information about Mike. Mike has spent over 25 years in the brand marketing business, and you know that I don't take marketing folks on this show, so you know I have to love him and love what he's doing in order to take him on the show. Normally, you know I don't. No salespeople, no marketing people, but Mike is special. Mike uses his experience to show businesses and creatives how to talk about themselves to their audience. That's amazing. His guiding philosophy, honed with time and experience, is super simple. When it comes to your audience, you have to be seen as one of three things. You have to either be first, be best, or be different. Mike shows you how to appear different in the eyes of your audience with his elevator method of building your pitch from the ground up. Mike, I'm super grateful that you've taken the time to be here. Welcome.
Izolda, thank you so much. The pleasure is mine. I appreciate you having me on. And how are you?
I am fabulous, actually. I just had an amazing conversation with an old college friend. We met in a class that we both took. It was a literary class on spy books. And so we just met, and he ended up going and being in naval intelligence for 36 years, and he just retired. So we just caught up from decades of not really having talked. So I'm just full of nostalgia, and we talked video games. I mean, everything. So I'm having a phenomenal morning, and I'm super.
That's great.
Yeah, I know. It's super, super fun. So tell me about you. How are you doing?
Well, I could sum it up a little bit more quantifiably. This week, I found out that we overpaid taxes last year by $19,000, and we're getting that back in 2 weeks. So my week has been fantastic since then.
What are your plans for the money?
Oh, man. Save some, use some for immediate needs, and probably do something fun with the family. I mean, but it'll be a cheap fun.
Hey, you're being responsible. I can appreciate, even if I would not be as responsible with that kind of windfall, I can appreciate that a grown-up person would be more responsible. I'm not adult in this way. I'm always like, let's go to Cuba or let's go to Ecuador, which Rich and I, my husband and I, are doing this summer. So there you go.
Nice. Well, I was of the, I'm of the impression, like, the accountant sent us the wrong stuff to pay against. I'm under the impression that if he gave me the right stuff and I just paid it and never thought about it again, it would be far less fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you pay too much and you're like, what? I win it back? It's like winning Price is Right.
That's a very optimistic way of looking at it. I tend to look at it as like I gave the government an interest-free loan for 6 months, and I'm not sure I like that. So I try to even out at the end. I try to not owe, and I try not to get any money back. But we did just go through taxes here in the USA, and if you're listening outside the USA, most people tear their hair out about their taxes. So anytime you can be happy about your taxes, I consider that a win. So Mike,
I think it's, I'm sorry, one more thing on taxes. I think it's amazing that we have to figure out what we owe them
I know.
ourselves, and then
Hmm.
they tell us to pay them that amount. And if we don't, we're in trouble. Why can't they just send us a number that says this is what you owe or what you're getting back?
Well,
Seems easier to me.
it's easier, but then again, for example, we're both business owners, and you have your business, I have my business, and they don't know what you have that is a business expense until you tell them. So
Yep.
for a lot of us, especially people who are working in the creative fields, like one of the things that I found out recently from an accountant that I was talking to is that because I write plays and am a member of the Dramatists Guild, when I go to see a show to evaluate it and to talk about it on the podcast, that the ticket for the show and the actual transportation to get to and from is deductible, which
Yep.
I had no idea was. So it was that was my big tax boon this time was what? That's deductible? All these years I have not been deducting it. Now I know I can. I feel very good about that.
Yep.
So it's a, it's always looking at the glass half full, I guess. So
Yep.
talk to me, Mike. I want to talk to you because I remember you did this thing in a group that we both belong to where you took us through your elevator method, your elevator pitch method for crafting how you talk about what you do.
Hmm.
And I would first of all, I thought it was brilliant, which is why when you and I started talking about you being on the show, I was like, yes, please come because this is so you make it super easy for someone like me who has trouble with this sort of stuff to understand. So can you do me a favor and actually, you know what? I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to say first thing, I want to ask you how you got to the place where you made the decision that this was going to be, that helping other people talk about what they do to their audiences was going to be the thing that you do with your life.
Well, I think, like everyone, what I wanted to do with my life was astronaut or fireman. So I kind of ended up here because I was too scared of rockets, and my buddy already took the fireman role.
Ah,
Um, no, my background was the lion's share of it, about 13 years, was on the agency side, ad agencies, marketing firms, events, and promotions. And my last position was more traditional advertising, a lot of TV commercials. I worked on site at Hasbro Games or Hasbro Toys, which is here in Rhode Island, where I'm located. In fact, if you've seen the show Family Guy, and Peter worked at a toy factory for a while, it's based on Hasbro.
oh, wow.
There you go. Fun fact for the day. Um, but anyway, what our job was on the agency side was to think about only 5% of their business. In other words, if I'm working with Hasbro and a new Iron Man figure comes out, my job with that Iron Man figure is to get kid to get mom to buy it.
Uh-huh.
That's what we had to worry about. And looking through the lens of the agency life, it was all about how we lead them to where they need to go on their terms and not ours. Meaning we could explain the story any way we wanted, but if they didn't understand it the way we need them to, we're in trouble. And I happen to be very good at that part. Working on the client service side, I was able to think strategically, new insights, new ideas that actually lended value to the conversations, instead of what a lot of people would end up doing by necessity, is like passing notes back and forth between the client and the creative team. And I thought it was important to be fluent in all of those languages: client, creative, media, production. But what I was able to focus on, or what I was able to take away from it, was audiences always shift, and I could meet them at their comfort zone, like where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, whether it's someone who's really introverted or extroverted, if it's somebody who's a visionary CEO, or it's somebody who's a soldier on the ground associate manager, all of them are clouded by this simple idea of they know everything. And on the agency side, I only had to know 5%. So I was able to sort out all the things in their mind, put it into something cohesive, and we'd get the right output, in form of, say, TV commercials or
Mm-hmm.
web spots. And I did a really good job with that, evidently, because Hasbro hired me. And
Hmm.
this is the learning that defined everything that I do, the insight, if you will. First of all, I was in an ocean of MBAs who would eat their young to climb the corporate ladder. And I came in this side door from the agency. I didn't think, act, talk like them. I had no idea what was going on. And the first 4 years, I was in the global brand management organization focused on marketing and product management. And I was not fast enough from the marketing side for their taste. And I didn't know, honestly, did not know one thing going on in the product management space. I was in product management. I worked on Jurassic World specifically, the re-release of the films.
Mm-hmm.
And 14 months, it was me not knowing what was going on for 8 hours a day.
Wow.
That's what it felt like. It was awful. And I was absorbed in all these details where I realized that Iron Man figure I referenced takes 2 years to bring to market. And the mechanisms, it's a Fortune 500 manufacturing company. The mechanisms to get them there are astounding. So it's no wonder they need an ad agency. It's no wonder they need a PR firm or a digital marketing group, because they can't get out of their own way. And for 4 years, they saw that I'm not good at making this stuff, but I'm really good at talking about it, because I talk about it in a way that relates to the audience, that's relevant to the audience, not the business, if that makes sense. I knew how to translate business to human. And for 3 years, they'd send me around the world, frankly, to all of the industry events called toy fairs. And my job was simple: to bring the buyers through our 6-minute experience of walking through the different game categories, etc. And what every other group at Hasbro would do, boys toys, girls toys, whatever, was here's the My Little Pony play set, and here's all the pieces that come with it, and here's how it works. Well, we have 400 games and they have 6 minutes. And even if we went into detail, it didn't matter, because they already had the sales sheet. They already know how much it costs. They even know how many they can fit on the shelf at Walmart. So what I would do is just think about, okay, how do they need to feel about what we're doing? And that became my focus in all of these events. The strategy being, I took this from the movie Inception. Everything I know is from the movies, I'm convinced. But they talk about an idea being like a virus without a cure. I'm paraphrasing. But once you put an idea in someone's head, they can't get rid of it. There's no remedy. I would put an idea in their head. That would put glasses on them with the lenses that I want them to see the next 5.5 minutes through. I'd substantiate, reinforce as we went through the experience, and I would bring them back to what I said at the beginning, but in the form of benefits. And sales would go up 10 to 15%, solely based on the fact that I was translating what's important of the business to the audience, not trying to force the business down the audience's throat. It's that idea of don't sell, get them to buy, right? That's what I knew how to do. So they'd send me to every year, with a couple exceptions or a couple others thrown in, but every year I was sent to Hong Kong, Germany, the UK, New York City, and LA for 2 weeks at a pop, to make sure our space came together the right way, do my job, and fly home. And I loved it. I loved doing it. What I was good at was communicating with human beings. So at the end of my tenure at Hasbro, fall of 18, I left. And January of 19, I started what I do now. And it was in the form of presentation skills, workshops at different, companies and agencies to show their teams how to effectively present to an audience, the how, okay? Then COVID hits, I can't go to anybody's office. So I needed to figure out, they didn't believe it could be done on Zoom. Zoom wasn't even a thing at that point. We weren't pushed into it yet, but I knew I could do it. They didn't believe it. So I had to figure out something different. The insight I landed on was pretty straightforward. I saw how people are communicating, and that's fine. But I noticed what they're communicating was miles off from what it should have been. So I decided to focus on what you say as opposed to how you say it. And what it became, the most general, I'm sure this is why I don't fit the mold of, sales and marketing in your mind, is I distilled it down to how a business answers the question, what do you do? And that question could be posed to me or you. It could be posed to a small business. It could be posed to Procter and Gamble for Colgate. Answering that question kicks off everything from there. And it defines how you're going to bring your audience through what you do, direct them the right way, and get them to act is all on their terms. So businesses spin their wheels trying to figure out what to say simply because they know everything. 100% of what you do is important to you. 5% of that is important to your audience. Maybe a percent up or down, but I guarantee you that's right around what it is. So if you know 100%, how do you find the 5%? That's what I turned my business into, is how you connect with your audience and stand out. To even get noticed, you have to show up to them as first, best, or different. That's what an audience remembers. The counterforce is there's no business without show business. We think, act, talk differently. We're playing a role whether we want to be or not. And the environment is so different. I mean, could you imagine if I said to you, I love the sound of the microphone you're using. Now, did you acquire that via an e-commerce platform? I would never say that to you, but that's how it would be stated in the business world. In our world, I'd say, did you get that online? That kind of complication bleeds through into company communication all the time. And it's simply because they know too much. And their audience needs to read the book in the order of pages. They want to skip around and talk about what's important to them, but that doesn't translate. So I made my business very similarly to how when an author writes a book, they can't write the blurb, the sales pitch, because every word's important to them. They give the book to a member of an audience. That person reads it, sees it from the audience perspective. It takes them 10 minutes to write a blurb. It's not hard for them. And that's the nature of what I do now, is to take my 20 years of experience in seeing it from both sides of the coin and showing businesses how to answer that question. What do you do? Seems very, foundational and sort of something everybody should need to be able to do, but it's harder than you think. So I walk in the audience's shoes for my clients, and it just so happens I fit into a lot of different types of shoes, and show them what their audience sees, show them how to get their attention right away, how to give them the information in the right order, sort of reading the book in the right order of pages and getting them to act. And that's what my entire business revolves around now, is that first, best, or different idea. Everybody can do different. And it's a question of getting out of your own head, stepping out. If you could have an out-of-body experience, you'd see things differently. So I provide that point of view for them.
I love that so much. And again, when you took us through that method of crafting your pitch in the meeting that we were in together, I felt very much like you had me. Like, oh, he knows what he's doing. Because there's so many people out there who go, I'm going to show you how to talk about, the elevator pitch from the first floor to the 11th floor. You have 14 seconds, go. But you broke it down into manageable chunks for someone like me. Again, I have issues with this sort of thing. So you broke it down into manageable chunks. When you're working with someone, and I'm going to stick with the creative end, let's say you're working with a creative artist. What is the process that you would take someone who's a creative artist who wants to have a good pitch? How would you take them through this concept?
So the first thing that I do is define my elevator method to them. And it's simple. If you think, maybe not simple, but the comparison is, if you think about an FAQ page on a website, those are written predictively, meaning they're anticipating the order of questions someone would ask, and they're providing the answers. Basically, it comes out to most general question to most specific, because that's how we think. We think in narratives. What happens next? Then what happened? Then what happened? The problem occurs when that narrative is out of order, or that narrative gets passed by because it's boring. Those are it doesn't connect. Like, those are the types of things that are detrimental. So, excuse me. So I built my elevator method predictively around the questions someone would ask. After the first one, what do you do? And the trick to all of it is getting their attention for 3 seconds. If you can't do that, nothing else matters. I use the example of a resume for this all the time. You spend a lot of time showing what you've done in your career and modeling it and presenting it in the best way possible. But the truth is, 6 seconds is the average amount of time spent with a resume by an employer, by the hiring team. That means all they could possibly consume is the first sentence. And on average, takes them 4 seconds to consume. That rationale applies today more than ever because there are so many options. We have access to everything, and there are so many responses and solutions. Think about someone like me. If you thought of me as a marketing consultant, for instance, there are thousands upon thousands of me on LinkedIn. I need to stand out from the rest. So my elevator method is built around questions that the audience would answer in the order they would ask them. And I guide that order a little bit from the jump. So the first floor of my elevator process is how you connect with them and get their attention for that 3 seconds. Then you keep them there by relating to what they're going through and making it very vivid that you get it. The next thing you have to do is solve it for them. But that should just be a sentence, a headline, because you want them to read how it's solved. Now, this isn't services yet. You have to establish a beginning to end process in their mind of what it's like to work with you. And then they're ready for your services. But now it looks like they're part of that 3-step process. It's the difference between a McDonald's menu and a 3-course meal. Then the last 3 things, what's in it for me? Like, how am I better off? That's benefits. Can you prove it works? Testimonials, case studies, that's validation, 7th floor. And 8th floor is call to action. What do you want me to do next? All it's doing is following this pattern, one-sided conversation. So tell me, what do you do? Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that? Okay, well, how do you help those people? All right, how does that solution work? What do I get in working with you? What's in it for me? What's the benefit of working with you over someone else? Can you prove it works? Can you give me any references or referrals to people you've worked with before? Yeah, you know what? I'm interested. Let's exchange cards. I'd love to have another conversation. That is the model of what you should say in networking or anywhere else. Your homepage, LinkedIn profile, new business pitch should follow that rigorously. And it's because that's how human beings think. They think got it online, not e-commerce platform. They think motivation before need state. Very simple explanation of this is if you ask me for the time, you're not asking because I'm curious. You're asking because you have to be somewhere or you have an appointment, right? If I focus on where you need to be first or what the urgency is first and then give you the time, I stand out as different from everybody else who's just saying, oh, it's 3 o'clock. And that's the premise of it. If you can attach to the motivation, you get their attention. If you can get that to say, we know how it feels idea and bring it to a lowest common denominator thought about what it means. So everybody's thinking about the same image. When you solve it, they're anticipating it. Those are the first 3 floors of my elevator. So if I'm working with an artist, I know there's obviously a lot of artists, right? What I'm going to do, if this artist is creating art to sell, is that what you mean for the example?
If they could be a performing artist, the point for me is that creatives often create.
Is the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine arts is the point. Okay, great. So what we want them to take away is creating art, taking this idea of human movement and turning, I'm using the stage as an example, turning, like clarifying and putting order and almost a symphonic flow to human movement is much different than walking down Fifth Avenue. You know, it takes an organization, it takes a rigor, it takes the ability to program your body from just walking or jogging or sitting or lying down to perform this unbelievable act. Now, if any stage performer led with that, that's going to hit home.
Okay, so that's very interesting. When they do that, when somebody does that, as you put it, lead with that, how, what are they paying attention to? How do they know before they do it what they should be paying attention to?
Well, what I force them to think about is they're asking a question because it's them, it's internal, it's the business, it's the artist. And ultimately, what they're looking for is the way to convey that to the outside world. So what everybody runs into is translation, right?
Uh-huh.
How do you move it to the outside? Now, when I start taking them down the path of what is your audience going through, we get it to the point where we can, give usually a word or a phrase to it that resonates with the audience. And from there, we're to find the audience, we're talking about what their motivation is, not what they need, what their motivation is.
Hmm.
In the instant, I'll give you an example of how this idea of connect, relate, and solve, the first three floors of my elevator. First is connection, and that's focused on motivation, not need state, just like the time example I gave you. And then second floor, relate, third floor, solve. Okay. I worked with an entrepreneur consultant. Essentially, she runs the business for people so they are focused on their idea or product or service. And I know a lot of people who do that. I've met a ton of business consultants who promise the same type of idea. So, where we started is, what does it feel like to run your own business? And we went back and forth, and 10 minutes into it, we landed on the word and agreed on the word chaos. Running your own business is chaos. And from there, we needed to give meaning to chaos that's beyond the eye of the beholder and get them focused on one implication of chaos. So we say it's like being on a boat in a stormy ocean and just holding on tight. Now, every single person who runs their own business and thinks of it as chaos is now thinking of the implication of a boat on a stormy ocean, exactly where we want them and how we want them to feel. So the first floor, now what she says, and you'll note entrepreneur consultant, business consultant never comes up. So what do you do? Well, I show you how to weather the storm of entrepreneurship. Huh, what do you mean by that? Well, running your own business, I mean, I'm sure you can relate. It is chaos. You have to worry about everything. Every day is like being on a boat in a stormy ocean and holding on tight. Yeah, I get you. So how do you help those people? Well, I simply navigate them to calm waters with a gentle tail breeze and get them to where they want to be. That's how to put it together for an entrepreneur consultant. Get them focused on a theme that relates to them, sure, but start with whether the storm, they feel like they're in a storm. Start with the motivation. I wouldn't start with navigate to calm waters because that doesn't mean anything to them yet. So I relate to them with the boat on the ocean, but I get their attention, weather the storm, bring it to its importance with boat on the ocean, and then thematically tie it to calm waters. That stands out so much more effectively than saying, I'm a business consultant.
Sure, but it seems to me like in listening to you, or I should say, and it seems to me that listening to you, like you're using, it's a metaphor that most people can relate to. The vast majority of us have lived through some sort of storm.
Yep.
Uh, and so do you recommend that for someone who is an entrepreneur in a different way? Because entrepreneurship can be a storm. It can be, I don't know, hot air balloon rides. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do you tailor it to the type of business it is, or the type of creative person, or the type of whatever the person is who's
Yeah.
trying to work with you? How do you do that? How do you analyze what sort of person and what sort of language you should be using in those various ways?
Of course. And half of it is the owner of the business, half of it is the audience. Think of it that way. There are
Okay.
three things your narrative, your pitch needs to do. First, connect. Connection is key. Direction is next. You got to lead them through the forest in the right path. And finally is projection. And that's your personality and attitude that comes out of you in your business. And personality is a fixed entity. There's we are who we are. We didn't have a choice kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are hyper analytical and very introverted, and they think very differently from, say, me, where I rely on influence. I'd make a good salesperson versus accountant type of stuff. That is inherently unchangeable. It's a constant. The variable is in the attitude. So you can take whatever situation it is, project the right attitude, and that is part you, part your audience, what you feel, what they need to hear kind of stuff. But it's important to understand the distinction, the difference between the two. For instance, let's say I'm in the bungee jumping, like jump off a bridge with a rubber band tied to your ankles kind of stuff, okay? And I invite a bunch of old women for a tea party. Then while they're having tea, strap these things to their ankles and push them over the side. No, that's not how it works. Like,
sure.
you are in the exhilaration business. That's your personality. X Games kind of stuff. That's it. But imagine the projection of that personality. If it's a leader, think a manager of a team, and he wants to give them a team building experience. Now, I can't leave exhilaration, but what I can say in that instance is, hey, team leader, this jump is the trust fall on steroids. You won't believe the effect it leaves on the adrenaline, the dopamine. It has an incredible unifying effect on your team. Or my son and his friends could walk up, and the guy says, yeah, do to the extreme, leap off a bridge. Exhilaration, but catered to that audience. That's the key in all of it, is how it projects is based on how the owner sees the outside world, but they have to keep themselves in it. So this particular example where it was a storm on, boat on an ocean, I've used similar comparisons to the idea of disorganization, chaos, whatever you have. The truth is, we're not the CEO or the C-suite of our business and every department under it. We've got a lot to think about. So I try to give them something they can relate to and anchor to. I recently worked with someone who specializes in lead and funnel management. And I started going in the direction of gaps. Like, you have to overcome these gaps in your work road. All of a sudden you come up to this big 30-foot gap. It's like, how do I get over it? But she came back saying it's really more like a pipe system. And I said, you mean like in a home? She said, no, bigger than that. So where we landed was a municipal water system where it comes from a source and it has to go to all these different directions and come together at the end to the output point, right? The outflow point. There are so many twists and turns that if anything's wrong, it disrupts the whole flow. So we had to shift from gaps to the pipes because that's how she thought about it. And it made it easier for her. It made it comfortable for her. And it kept everybody that she talks to on a simple path. So that's an example of how you have to bring out, yes, the personality is there, but if you rely only on personality, here's what happens. How many times have you seen on LinkedIn, increase your leads 100x by using my system, right, or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
That system won't work for 75% of the population, at least not effectively, because that person is a certain personality type and does things their way. So his target, let's say he's a real boiler room sales guy, there's no reason for him to be talking to accountants or creatives and stuff. He needs to be talking to type A lunatics who just want to get it done, because that's what his personality is.
Okay, so I love that you're saying this, and what this leads me to is the ability to connect and interact in the way the person needs you to connect and interact. But how do you, I should say, because I'm asking the expert, how do you decide, do you evaluate the person right away? Do you research them ahead of time? How do you decide the kind of connection the person you're going to be talking to is going to need? And more importantly, why is that so crucial for your brand as the entrepreneur or the creative or the business person?
Sure. But let's start from the point where no matter how hard you try, it's hard to get your business to feel like you. And again, it's that separation between human and business mind. It's a hard thing to do, but you want you to be in the business. And a lot of times it'll be forced putting you into the business. I'll give you an example. How many times have you seen a coach's page or someone who's written a book? That's an act of passion. They put it at the top of their website. That's a crime of passion. They want to tell the world about what they do, about what they wrote. But unless you're Danielle Steele, I don't care. I'm not there for an author. But if you moved that to the bottom as a call to action, I'm much more apt to buy it. And typically in these instances, it's getting them out of their own head, but I can see what type of attitude and personality is more important to understand, because attitude, you can do whatever you want. It's variable. You choose how you react to something, and that's the only thing you can do. It happens. You can't stop that. So personality is where I start. And typically, I happen to be able to pick it up pretty quickly. I will look at their business. I will look at their About Me section first, because more often than not, that point of connection is buried in their About Me section. But think about how much of a person's personality and attitude you get out of their About Me section. Some of them are, here's my career and all the things that I've done. Well, again, I don't care. This is about me. If they start, but second paragraph down or third, every time I look, I find what the real thing is. I'm doing this because these people going through this, that's what I saw, so I created this. And they bury that in their About Me section. That sentiment should be the first thing, because that's what's going to grab your audience. So why put it in your About Me section? It's because you're going to lead with your solution as a headline, and here's all my services. So getting out of that mentality is about first understand. If somebody hops on the phone with me and says, hi, how are you? And waits for me to talk again, I already know half the game. I know, I can guess what kind of industry they're in simply because they're introverted and reserved. So that's the type of stuff that I look for in even the kickoff call, not the kickoff calls, the get to know you calls. I can pick that kind of stuff out. And if I can give them a couple examples on how to apply that personality and project it the right way, they start to see how it's all coming together. But all of it is related to the personality of them drives the personality of the business. And that's what it should be. I don't have any issue with the idea of owning what you do, being proud of it and wanting to be up in front. The problem is you're not always up in front. You want to preach and shout off the, from the mountaintops, look how I can help you. But if you haven't connected them at the base of the mountain with why you need my help, they don't notice you on that mountain. Like it's stuff like that I'm thinking of as I'm working with clients. But it all starts with the personality and the type of business. I usually have more than enough to be dangerous.
I love that. So, okay. You're talking to me, and I love what you're saying about this, again, this power of connection. When you're talking about smaller businesses, they don't often know what to say, right? But when you're talking about the larger businesses, you worked on a bunch of movies, Star Wars, Jurassic World, Transformers, things like that.
The toys for the movies, not
the toys for the movies. I'm sorry. But well, to me, that's working with that's the thing though. To me, that's working with the movies, because branding, I was just talking about this with my friend Doug that I was just talking to before you and I got on this call. And we were literally showing each other our various figurines. Like I have my Edna Mode that sits on my desk, and I have my Velma from Scooby-Doo that sits on my desk. And every time I look at them, I have a little chuckle, and I remember the movies or the TV show or whatever. And I think that it is I think there's this branding that goes through. Everybody knows I have short dark hair, and I wear glasses like Velma and like Edna Mode. So to me, I relate to them, right? I'm a geek girl and I relate to them. But
Yep.
I think there's something there that's very powerful. That notion of the branding of these creative things like the Transformers, like Star Wars, the tendrils of that goes out into the toys, into the games, into the messaging. And what I'm wondering about that is when you're working with these already sort of more established brands, how do you approach those projects, and what are the strategies that you employ, and how are they different from when you're working with a smaller business or a smaller creative?
Well, that's a great question. Fundamentally, philosophically, they're no different.
Hmm.
The big difference is someone like me or you isn't going to be buying a Super Bowl commercial anytime soon. We rely on networking, on LinkedIn, on things like this to amplify who we are
Right.
and create, attraction and create that connection and get people to want to know more about you. That's fundamentally what small businesses do, right? So for them to be able to answer that question effectively is typically going to be in person or something along those lines. Now let's apply it to Hasbro, and we'll apply it to Monopoly. This is a great story of something that actually happened in my tenure there. We had to figure out how to sell more Monopolies. And that is, again, one of 400 games in the game space, but it's obviously the most world renowned and recognized, and it's our
Sure.
biggest brand in that category. And we also know that it's a game that's purchased once for $15, kept 20 years, and you replace the thimble with a real one. So how do we get them to buy more? Now, internally, what a company is thinking about is, okay, we're going to do quantitative and qualitative research. We'll run some focus groups, and we'll come back with these insights. And they come back with 4 or 5 insights. Well, what do you think that's going to do to the discovery of what to do next for Monopoly? Run us in 5 directions, 4 or 5 directions. We needed one insight, and it came from like an associate brand manager on the Monopoly team who maybe on lunch one day was on BuzzFeed or something and came across a poll that said 50% of people cheat when they play Monopoly. We took that, or the team, I was sort of ancillary to this, but the team took that insight. And that's where a product, what to do next originated from, was that one insight. They get in front, the director on the business gets in front of the C-suite and all the people in one of those, 60-person presentation halls. And first thing she shows is a screen grab from BuzzFeed that has that stat right on it. For 5 minutes, maybe a little less, everyone in the room, right up to the CEO, was talking about either cheating and how they did it or catching someone cheating. The next slide introduced Cheaters Edition Monopoly.
Oh, my stars.
Where you try to get away with cheating. And if you get caught, just for effect, we added an 18-inch plastic handcuff to the go to jail space. And it started with the reason it was successful, the reason it sold something like, I don't remember, but like 500,000 copies or whatever, is because every person in that room got attached to it on the first slide, not the second.
Right.
They're
Right.
thinking second. The audience is thinking first slide, not second. And that happens all the time in big companies. That happens all the time with solo operators like myself. It all comes from the same place. They're starting with the service. It's like building a huge roller coaster and then saying, okay, how do we build out the rest of the amusement park? You wouldn't do it that way. You'd plot out the amusement park and where that roller coaster should go. And every one of my clients, whether it's a big company or someone like me, we all suffer from that same problem. We just can't see what the outside sees. So ultimately, the way I approach it with them is to say it has to be a conversation. It can't be, and it has to be a conversation where they are in control, not us. They're the ones who are saying, oh, well, tell me about this. Think about the first time you meet someone, and maybe you go down the road of, oh, you went to that college? Did you know this person? Did you know? That's just us trying to form a connection so we could get into a conversation. So if any of these businesses took a step back from presentation and pitch mode and looked at it from the outside as conversation, you don't want to have a confusing conversation with someone, but that's going to be a hell of a lot more engaging than Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to talk about this. I mean, in the circles that you and I tend to run in, what I hear 95% of the pitches that I hear fall into one of two categories. The first one is the business card recital. My name is, my business is, my services are, here's how to get in touch. That is the predominance of the 95%. The other is I call it Story Brand Mad Libs, a brilliant platform that people stop at the I help statement. And it's I help business A going through challenge B, accomplish goal C by providing solution D that lets them do benefit E. And it is a run on sentence. I can see it coming from a mile away. If I look at a LinkedIn profile, the first two words are I help. I guarantee you there's 4 lines below that photo. And that's because people just go through the rich. It's like, I need an accountant. I need, this technology to do my job. I need a pitch. I need a website. It's just one of the things you need, but it's the most important because everything that comes out of your mouth is designed to be the one right way to talk to your audience and get them connected, and get them to act. That should be no different on your website. That should be no different of a perspective when you're creating a Super Bowl campaign. Like all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And everything you do communicates is the general idea. No one has the ability to see that for themselves. I didn't. I just explained to you and your audience what I do for a living. When I started this business, this is going back to when I built my own website in beginning of 2019, 2020. I put as the headline, don't pay overhead, call Mike instead. Now looking back, I sounded like a personal injury attorney with a billboard on Route 95. But in the moment when I wrote it, I had sort of assessed my capabilities and what I'm able to accomplish. I can do everything from this step, which is positioning, strategy, execution. I know how to do it all. I've had to learn it, but I could do it faster and cheaper than going to an agency or something. And an agency you'll get 40% return on investment because the other 60% goes to overhead and profit. That is why I wrote that line. Does that sound like anything close to what I do for a living? No, I have no idea what I do for a living based on that. So I hired my friend Abby to rewrite my website. And after she slapped me upside the head and said, "What's wrong with you?" she rewrote the whole thing. She's the one who showed me to say, talk about your business in a way that gets your audience to say, tell me more. Because that's what I do, but I couldn't see it. I'm acting like an attorney. Got one right 3 miles from my house. In pain, call Wayne.
Right.
I sounded exactly like that, but I couldn't hear it. I was in an echo chamber. I was thinking about everything that I do, and I landed on one minute detail that I could say to somebody as a benefit of working with me. It was in the wrong place. Act of passion, crime of passion. It's the book again.
Yeah. Wow. And it's interesting that you went to someone else, that you weren't relying just on yourself to know it all, right? To know how to do it, to know how to put it together, to know how to create the website, to know how to do all of that stuff. And I think we tend to do this, especially solopreneurs, whether you're in a creative field or one that isn't traditionally creative. We start thinking, oh, I need to learn it all. I need to know it all. I need to do it all. And then you end up in a situation where I personally have this issue. It's one of the reasons I learned so much from you in that one talk that you gave, was because this is not my strong suit. So I guess the question I have for you about this is, you talked about this before. You talked about the significance of being first, best, or different in the eyes of your audience. Can you talk a little bit about how you said, oh, we'll figure out how you're different. That's the one. How do you do that? How does knowing that influence people's perception of who you are, of what you do, of specifically how you can help them do what they need to do?
Well, it starts with just looking at a competitive set, right? How many other people do what I do? So let's say you go on LinkedIn. This is anybody can do. There's something anybody can do. It's not necessarily how I handle it, but you could go on LinkedIn, put your job title, let's say it's executive coach, and you're going to see a lot of executive coaches.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing to do is read the lines right below their photo. And invariably, they are all saying the same thing and or leading with their solution. Every single one. So the starting point is, if they all have the same solution, you've got to let somebody know something before you get to the solution. If they come in and see all these options, then it's a crapshoot. But if you give them something to think about when they look at all these options, it jumps off the page. Imagine a city square filled with 10,000 umbrellas, black umbrellas, and you're looking down from the top, but one umbrella is red. How many umbrellas do you see? That's the premise of this. So the first thing that I'm going to look at with them is, all right, you're a business coach. Well, who are you helping? And they explain it to me. And then I say, how do you help them? And they go through their service process. And it usually takes them 5 or 10 minutes to get it all out, which is an impossibility if you're pitching your business. Remember that. So they get it all out. What I'm listening for are indicators of why they're doing the what and the how. And those are always lowest common denominator ways to think about it. Meaning, I am going to generalize a lot of stuff to prove a point initially. That all the specific things we do, our proprietary programs, our workshops, our masterminds, none of that matters to them until you pull them in the door. And the only way you're going to pull them in the door is to stand out from all those other searches. I think I did it on this call, right? The plumber. Or did I already talk about that? I get lost sometimes.
No, not the plumber. We have not talked about the plumber yet.
Thank goodness. I did on my last call. That's why I was confused. If you need a plumber, go online and look for a plumber. The first 2 results you see, or 5 results you see, we're a plumber, we're a plumber, we're a plumber, will be there in 10 minutes. Which one stands out? Sure. And it's because if it's a light bulb or a shingle on the house, fix it on Saturday. That goes on your project list. Water is different. Time stands still. And in that moment, we need it fixed in 10 minutes. We can't do anything else until that problem is solved.
Right.
That plumber appears different in that moment simply because we took a step back and looked at every other plumber around them, and every single one of them is saying we're a plumber. So finding that identity first of what your audience is doing and how you help them allows to connect the dots. It's like what plus how equals why, almost, in my mind. So when I'm working with someone, I'm probing with some questions to get them to start talking down the right alley. But then my job is to simplify it on the fly and make it one way to see it. Don't give it too many opportunities to waver. And it's usually based on one truth about how a human being thinks or what they're going through. That's what needs to be attached to. And I'll give you an example. If I own a PR firm and you asked me what I do, I said, oh, I run a PR firm. Practically speaking, how many more questions would you even have for me? Because you know what a PR firm is. But that game changes if I answer with, I make news when it matters. You don't know I'm a PR firm yet, so that's good. You're going to say, well, what do you mean by that? That sounds interesting. But what I'm saying is actually the exact motivation for why any business would need a PR firm. Their news has to have impact. They can't risk it falling on deaf ears. So that PR firm stands out as completely different from the rest. So we land on that starting point, and then I'm off and running. I take it to the relation, solution, process, services, benefits, and I deliver it to them with this new perspective. Most of the time when they see it, they're like, what the hell? Because it feels so different. But once they go through it, they realize it's exactly aligned with what they do. I've just moved things around and enhanced a few things. It's not about you have to be ultra creative. It's about you have to be rigorous in the order of the narrative and how you deliver the sentiments. So that's how I start it. And, running through a conversation, I schedule an hour with my clients, but it usually only takes 45 minutes to arrive at that connection point, that point of difference, if you will. What are they going to notice from you that they won't notice from everybody else? And invariably, without exception, speak to their motivation, not their need state, and you'll stay out of the weeds.
Oh, you're killing me over here. Like, I'm listening to you and I'm going, I'm doing it all wrong. So, right. So here's the thing though. Like you said, speak to their motivation.
Yep.
Okay. I keep coming back to creatives. You're a dancer. Let's go with that. You're a dancer. You want people to know there's a woman named Kim Hale who just recently she moved from LA to New York because what she really wants to do is dance on Broadway. She's not a youngster, right? She's not a youngster. She is in her 50s, I think. And she puts up a ton of videos of herself dancing and she's teaching dancing at one of the dance studios here right now. She's setting herself apart in part because she is a dancer in her 50s, right?
I would go with the foregone elegance of dance.
Okay. So you are immediately, and this is what I've been trying to get at this whole conversation, you immediately see that. I just gave you we didn't talk about this beforehand. You didn't know I was going to bring this up, but your mind immediately went into this, I don't know, process that you went, okay, this is what I would do with this. Talk about what goes on with you to get to that place.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry. I would have gotten to this sooner. I apologize. But this is
no.
If I were forced to say what's one thing you can do that comes really hard to other people, it is this kind of stuff. Because what you just told me and described coming from LA to New York, okay, that puts me on the big city, big dreams track.
Right.
Then you said her age.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately equate it with when she started dancing, say 35, 40 years ago, when she was 10, let's say, okay? What did dance look like then versus what it looks like now?
Right.
And if I were to use my age in my favor, I want to use words like elegance. I want to use words that speak to what a more experienced dancer, almost from another time, but I'm not saying, it's not the old lady from the Titanic. What I mean is 35 years ago, that may have gotten lost in today's dance. So if she wants to stand out, she's combating her age. She's combating a new market and a new dream to be on Broadway. And she's combating a ridiculously young competitive set.
Right.
So how does she set herself apart? Speak to the elegance of a 50-year-old woman who has 35 years of experience.
See, and that and that is exactly, I'm like listening to you, I'm like, wow, now that you've said it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see it. But before that, it would not, that notion of elegance. And when you watch her videos, she's an incredibly articulate, elegant dancer, and she does a lot of jazz. So speaking you got it without me ever mentioning that part. But and by the way, it's not, I just want to clarify, it's not that I wanted you or expected you to get to that place earlier. It's more that I was trying to figure out, honestly, Mike, how to ask you about that part of what you're doing. And I wasn't getting it inside my own head because it's, to me, that ability is really it's singular because most people have to analyze for quite a lot longer, and it sounds to me like you've honed it, either that or it's a natural ability, I'm not sure which, but you've honed an ability to take all of these disparate pieces of information and very quickly synthesize them into a perspective, a direction that other people would take a really long time to get to. And so the thing that I sort of come back to, the thing that's resonating with me is this approach can, if somebody wants to work with you, that approach would help you take all of these different, and I'm talking about myself a lot right now because I have too many areas of focus and I know it, but you can take disparate snippets of what I say and go, this is how I would put this in the blender and come out with the world's greatest pina colada. So in that moment, if somebody says, Mike, I want to work with you, how do they find you? Where is the space they need to go to find out what Mike Verret does and how to perhaps work with him to get their message clarified?
That is really simple. Go on LinkedIn, look for Mike Verret, and look for the one that says, I bet I can pitch your business better than you. I'm really one of like 12 Mike Verrets on LinkedIn anyway, but that's the easiest, most effective way and quickest way to find me.
Okay. Okay. So go find Mike Verret and 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 say, help me, please. No, I mean that's the thing though. Honestly, this is one of these things that a lot of us think we know how to do, but you do. uh, I'm going to be very honest. I don't take marketers on this show because, and branding people, because it's my audience goes, whatever. But what you did in that half hour that I heard you do, what the magic that you do made me go, this is so different. Most people talk about benefits. You aren't. You're talking first about the motivation of the person. And that is very, very different to me. And it resonates with me in a way that so many other branding folks, they just don't.
Well,
So
I think one of the key things to acknowledge is I'm not thinking about it from a brand perspective at all. I'm thinking of it from a conversation. It spins off into what the brand and the marketing should be because it's so foundational. But I do use my experience in that space a lot. I'm going to bring it all the way back to one of the things you talked about right at the beginning, For Dummies. If you read those books, all they're doing is taking snippets of the full text, right?
mhm, mhm.
All I'm doing when I'm listening is grabbing those snippets in my head. I happen to be able to think creatively and very, very quickly on how to adapt it. That's more just how I think. There's no replicating that. But what I'm listening for are the key ingredients to what they're trying to say. And I'm grabbing words here and there. LA to New York, one concept. 50-year-old woman wants to get on Broadway, another concept, right? Those two pieces of information, I could start telling a story about what's happening in my head
Mhm.
and then convey that story in a log line. That's what I try to do, is make it as like a headline response to it. And that becomes really important. I always talk about Ghostbusters almost didn't happen because they couldn't figure out how to sell it into a studio. It was a batshit crazy concept in 1984.
Right.
And they tried to just tell them the story. Okay, this is this, and this is what happens, blah, blah, and they couldn't get the right response. Then they figured out they need an idea to put in their head and then read the story to them. So the next one and final one they went into, they said, I want you to imagine this: ghost janitors of New York City.
Mhm.
I don't think you could find a better 6 words to summarize that film. And I've seen it so many damn times, but think about what they do: pest control, dressed in coveralls. There's a song on the soundtrack called Cleaning Up the Town. 6 words explained an entire film. That is what I focus on.
And
Take a
it's
whole story and distill it.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, right there, that taking the whole story and distilling it into 3 or 4 or 5, 6 words, for me, I'm a as you might have noticed, I talk a lot and I take, why use 6 words when 42 will do? That's one of my issues in my whole life. I'm verbose, I admit it. But then there's a balance to be had between finding those 6 words and being memorable in this way and avoiding being over the top, right?
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how someone who's working on this stuff would navigate that and make sure that they don't go into gimmick land?
I think, well, you're stating exactly what to avoid. Different is not, I'm gonna stand on the corner dressed as a clown and spin a sign for dollar pizza slices. Yes, that looks weird, but I'm not gonna remember what you do. I was in a networking group where I remember he was playing the role of a pilot. I don't think I can tell you what he did for a living. His background was a cockpit. He was literally dressed as like a Pan Am, or Pan Am. Jesus, how old am I? United Airlines pilot.
Uh-huh.
And he gave his entire presentation like, folks, this is the captain speaking. Like, what is wrong with you? What do you want to be remembered for is more important, right?
Right.
And that's just tone deaf. That doesn't make any sense. Being different for different sake does not make sense. The quickest thing to do is find 3 businesses like yours and look at what they're saying. And then ask yourself why they're saying it. And you're going to find out that they're just communicating their solution because they assume whoever comes in there knows exactly what they're looking for.
Is that true, though? Does
Yep.
the person who's coming in know exactly what they're looking for?
Well, maybe not, but I'm talking about just that 3 seconds of attention.
Okay.
They don't even come in the door yet. I mean, think about how you make decisions. You're reading down a bunch of Google listings, right? And the one that jumps out at you or the one that delivers for you is the one you stick with. But they've got endless choices and they don't even hit your website. There was a commercial 2 years ago, a campaign that Google did where this woman buys a Conair product, like a hair dryer or a curling iron, and never once comes into contact with the Conair brand. She bought something from them and never came into contact with the brand. That is the consumer power, right? Amazon is responsible for all of this. They introduced ratings and reviews, which decimated brand power. No longer could I say you need what I've got, because I'm going to say, well, you got 3 stars and 10,000 people who say otherwise. Who am I going to trust?
Right.
So the brand has nothing to do with it. What it has everything to do with is that first 3 seconds. And then if they like what they see, why are they going to leave? But what they see is the next thing you say. If it's not right, they go to back button, next result, back button, next result. We all do it.
Right.
It's human behavior these days. So what ends up being the cure is just, there's 6 marbles, 5 of them are blue, 1 of them is green. We are trained to see differences. It's what happens to us. Think about going on Instagram and everybody knows the gesture of moving your thumb and scrolling, and then you stop on something. There are so many options you just blew through. Why did you stop on that one? It was sating the motivation for why you were on Instagram, whether you realize it or not.
There's so much psychology behind this. It's so fascinating.
It's more a blend of just human nature, like how we think, married with philosophy. I think, therefore I am. You can't prove or disprove that statement, right? But people will tell me, no, research has to be more in depth and analytical. I'm like, fine. Whatever you come back with, I'm going to show you what it really means. And I'm going to show you one insight what it really means. Because you cannot look at it through an analytical lens. We don't think that way. It's like 20% of the population thinks in ones and zeros. Copywriters, engineers, coders. They think in ones and zeros because their personality allows it. Well, bad news for them, 80% of us think in stories.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you translate a piece of technology, for instance, to an audience that only thinks in stories and get them to understand it? It's really, really hard to do. Invariably, they come back and say, why don't they see the brilliance of this? Why aren't they getting it? It's a translation issue. I don't need stuff like quantitative research and all of these data analytics and that kind of stuff. I just think about what that person's going through and how they may think, right? If you're late to pick somebody up and it's an important pickup, like let's say it's your child at school and they're only 6 years old. Well, I've been in that situation and I'm panicked. I'm like, oh shit, I'm in so much trouble. And he's just standing there waiting. It does not take me a bunch of analytics and research and data to figure that out. It takes a second of stepping outside of the business and thinking like a human being. And therein lies the issue for all of us. Business, no business without show business. It's a role, but it completely warps our view of what it really means on the outside. Simon Sinek says, well, that's a hard thing to say. Simon Sinek's whole ethos is built around find your why, right?
Mm-hmm.
That why is useless unless it translates to their why. Because whatever value you think you have, if the outside world doesn't perceive it that way, you don't have that value.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, revolutionary in some ways, but also something that we don't, again, we don't get taught this. We don't get, there's no, and I did not take marketing or anything classes when I was in college. I was an
Neither
English
did I.
major. But at the same time, though, you've figured out these things, some by trial and error, some because you have a natural ability to synthesize. I'm not sure which holds sway in the moments when you're doing the magic that you do, but there is something really powerful here to me as I listen to you. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes all the sense in the world. Not sure I can do it, but it does make all the sense in the world
Well,
when you
it
explain
helps
it.
that, yeah, it helps that my personality type is influence. I'm articulate for the most part. My wife would argue, but when I'm speaking with someone in this instance, I could be articulate, I could think quickly, and I can get to a point quickly. That's what I know how to do, but other people just can't. So think about if you've ever gone to a great talk on something and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to put this into action. Then the second you step out of the auditorium, you're like, oh shit, how did I do this again? He made it sound so easy.
Right.
That happens to all of us. And being able to exercise what you learn is math comprehension versus application. 2 + 2 = 4. How fast is a train moving from New York to Chicago? Those are two principles, right? What happens is we get all excited about the comprehension, but the application we can't do. The reason we can't do it isn't because we didn't understand it, isn't because we don't want to do it. It's because we don't know how to fit the pieces of our personal or business puzzle around that idea.
Yeah. And for me personally, I have trouble because there are too many things,
Yeah.
so it's just some of this is kill your darlings and some of this is I'm not sure what would be the most effective. So if you're not sure, if you're looking to do this, would you recommend I know you said look at people's LinkedIn profiles, but if you're at the point where you're trying to do this, where you're trying to write your pitch or fix your pitch, what would you recommend to someone who's going, I just have too many things to talk about? How do I find out which one would be the most motivating to my audience?
Well, this is probably a little self promotional, but it is also the easiest way to understand and apply this for yourself. And it's right on, visit my website on my LinkedIn profile. So it's easy to get to, but it's a 20-minute presentation on exactly how to execute this methodology with examples and everything. And I walk through all 8 floors of my elevator in detail and both comprehensively and in application. And people who are, they pay attention and take away the right points, it does help them. And the worst case scenario is I'd end up with your email address.
Oh no, good heavens, not that. You mean you'd
But
send me more information on how to
yeah,
do this stuff? Ah,
yeah, exactly.
I'm
No,
shocked.
but I mean,
Shocked I am.
if people get in a jam, even if they listen to this, for instance, and they hear me prattling on about this, if they really want to understand it, this is exactly where I would send them. It's 20 minutes of your life, but I promise I'm not boring. And it does outline in more detail everything that you and I have been discussing the past hour.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And I'm going to put the link to that and also to your socials in the show
Perfect.
notes so that if you're listening to this and you want to know more about how Mike Verret does what he does, but also finding out. And I think, let me see if I can get to it. It's called Peek Behind the Curtain and Fix Your Pitch. And that would be the video. And yes, it asks, the drill. You've done this before for many people. It asks for your first name, your email address, and then Mike's going to send you more goodies as he does more stuff. So that's that to me is fabulous, and I will be doing that myself as soon as you and I are off this call. So I have just a couple more questions. No, because one of the things this conversation has really pointed out to me is that I'm really good at seeing this stuff for other people, and I don't know if this happens to you too. It may be had because you had to ask your friend to help you with your website. I'm incredibly good at seeing stuff like this for other people. When I try to do it for myself, I face a big blank wall. So
That's because 100%.
yeah, and that synthesis is something that I'm going to watch that video and see about modifying and improving what I'm doing too. So the last two questions, but before I get to them, Mike, I am so grateful to you. This was a super fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on the show and for
Thank
sharing.
you. Are you kidding me? I should be the one thanking you. This is a blast. Anybody who'll give me a microphone should be knighted.
You're welcome back anytime. That is for sure. So these are the last two questions. So the first question is, what is the thing that makes you get out of bed in the morning? And I don't just mean an alarm clock.
Well, it's my dog, but no. I think that for the most part, while I really enjoyed being on the agency side, but I had 7 years of just being beaten down in this corporate America. So I deem these 5 years a rebellion against that. I'm rebelling against my corporate years.
Right.
But honestly, your reaction to the bring elegance to the stage, that comment, your reaction to it is why I get out of bed. Because as soon as I simplify something for someone and they just go, oh, yeah, I see that. That's my favorite reaction, and one that I want to get as many times as I can from people. I love doing that.
I am in the exact same boat when I teach someone how to use their voice in the best possible way and they get it. The light goes on and I'm like, I do a little dance. We literally do a little jig together. So yes,
absolutely.
I'm right there with you on that. So here we are at the very, very last question. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
And I have a limit on words?
Well, skywriting. So maybe 8 to 10 words at the most, because you run out of sky pretty quickly.
You are nothing without your attitude.
Ooh, that is brand new. A lot of people say things like be kind and you matter, which I think is really appropriate. But this, you you put a little badass in your skywriting. I like it.
Well, I mean, if you consider it, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we choose to react.
Sure, absolutely.
We don't have control over anything else.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I agree completely. It's the response, how you respond, how you let it affect you, and how you respond is the crucial thing. Oh, Mike, I am again super grateful you took the time. We were like, oh, it's going to be an hour, and here we are, an hour and a half later. And I still, of the questions that I had prepared, I have like 10 questions that I didn't get to. So hopefully you will come back.
We didn't even cover the time I got Optimus Prime drunk.
No, we didn't. And we could have. And we didn't cover the time that you accidentally named
the dinosaur?
No, you named a character after a member of the Church of Satan. So.
No, the studio did that. The movie studio did that. I saved them.
See, we didn't talk about that, and we should have, obviously, because I had my facts wrong. Yeah, I like to have my facts right, but obviously I read something wrong because I wrote it differently.
Listen. You remembered the fact that we talked about it. I'm good enough with
that. Well, hopefully I haven't done that too often. Oh, remember that time when you were talking about Satan and a person goes, no, not even a little. Okay, never mind. Anyway, Mike, I am once again super grateful that you took the time to be here and to chat. And I hope that you'll come back and we'll get to the other 10 questions that we didn't get to this time. And we will talk about getting Optimus Prime drunk, which just sounds hilarious to me. That must be quite a story. Thank you again for being on the show. This is Izolda Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast. If you are smart, and I know you are, you will go find Mike Verret's website on the show notes. Go check out what he's doing. Watch that video. I heard him speak for half an hour and was like, you must come on my podcast. Because, as you can tell, he's different than other people who do what he does. And maybe I can say it like he does things differently than anybody else does. And that is fabulous. And it's really well worth thinking about what you're doing in this really unique way. This is Izolda Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the show if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trachtenberg and is copyright 2024. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.